They banned fire across the colonies. 3 weeks later, satellites detected thousands of hidden heat signatures, rising like stars. Humans had built warmth from stone. Where are you watching from? Subscribe to help this story reach more worlds. The fire begins now. The morning Rafa Calder's daughter asked about bread. The sky over Karen IV was the color of old rust. Leah stood in the doorway of their stone cottage, 9 years old and sharp-eyed, watching her father's hands shake as he tried to light the hidden burner under the kitchen counter. "Dad, can we have toast?" she asked. "Like Mom used to make?" Rafa's fingers froze on the igniter. The memory of his wife, Elena, standing at the same counter 2 winters ago, still hit him like a fist to the chest, before the fever took her, before the Valen Directorate tightened its grip on every spark and flame in the outer colonies. "Not today, kiddo," he said, his voice rough as the red clay under their boots. "Power's rationed again." But Leah was already looking past him, out the window where 3 Valen drones drifted like silver wasps over the settlement of Sendabaiksha. They'd been circling since the miners went on strike last month. The Directorate's answer had been swift and absolute. Total energy cutoff. No generators, no combustibles, no open flames. The message was simple. Without fire, without bread, without warmth, there would be no resistance. Rafa clicked the igniter anyway. A tiny blue flame stuttered to life. For exactly 4 seconds, hope flickered in his chest. Then the drones descended. They came through the window without breaking glass, just phasing through like smoke. Rafa grabbed Leah's hand as red scanner lights swept across their kitchen. A mechanical voice crackled. "Unauthorized combustion detected. Violation code 7 Alpha. Fine 400 credits. Repeat offense. Detention." The flame died. Leah's small hand squeezed his so hard his knuckles cracked. When the drones finally left, trailing their red lights like accusations, Rafa sank into the chair his grandfather had built from Karen stone. Leah climbed into his lap without asking, the way she used to when she was smaller. "The Valens took Mr. Sato's oven yesterday," she whispered. "The big one at the community center," Kayla said her mom cried. Rafa wrapped his arms around his daughter and stared at the cold burner. His hands were cracked from years of masonry work, scarred from building walls that kept the wind out. Walls that kept families warm, but walls couldn't bake bread. That afternoon, he walked to the settlement storage depot where Yelena Joe had called an emergency meeting. 30 people crowded into the unheated space, breath misting in the air. The engineer stood beside a makeshift table, her black hair pulled back, fingers stained with charcoal from drawing. "They took the industrial ovens," Yelena said without preamble. "Every electric heating element, every fuel cell. They want us cold and hungry until we beg." An old miner, Gregor, laughed bitterly. "So what do you want us to do? Rub sticks together?" Yelena unrolled a sheet of recycled fabric across the table. On it, sketched in careful detail, was a dome-shaped structure made entirely of stone and clay. "We build these," she said. "Domed ovens. No metal, no electronics. Just rock and clay and fire from plant fiber. Technology the Valans can't confiscate because it's older than their entire civilization." Silence. Then more bitter laughter. "That's museum shit," someone muttered. "My grandmother's grandmother used to talk about those." Rafa stepped forward. His voice came out quiet but carried to every corner of the depot. Museums fed people too, before the Directorate, before any of this. Yelena met his eyes. Something passed between them, an understanding born of desperation. "My yard," Rafa said. "We'll build the first one there. Who's got materials?" Leah tugged on his sleeve. "I can help, Dad. I remember how Mom kneaded dough. I watched her every time." Outside, the wind cut across Sendabaisha like a blade. But inside the depot, 30 pairs of hands began to move. Rafa's backyard became a construction site at dawn. Yelena arrived with her blueprints and a satchel full of measuring tools that looked like they'd survived 3 colony generations. Leah sat cross-legged in the dirt, arranging stones by size while humming something her mother used to sing. The design was deceptively simple, a domed structure of fire-resistant basalt rock, mortared with clay from the riverbed, with an opening just wide enough for a paddle to slide through. The real trick, Yelena explained, was thermal mass. The stones would absorb heat slowly and release it even slower, maintaining temperature for hours after the fire died. "But what do we burn?" Rafa asked, his hands already mixing clay and water into mortar. The Vaylans confiscated every scrap of wood. They're monitoring biosignatures for smoke. Yelena's smile was sharp. "That's where we get creative." She pulled out a dried bundle of something that looked like brown, fibrous seed pods. "Kenru plant. Grows wild in every ditch on this planet. Everyone treats it like a weed. But these fiber pods burn hot and fast, and the smoke signature is nearly identical to industrial coolant venting. The drones won't even flag it." Rafa turned the pod over in his scarred hands. "You're telling me we're going to heat an oven with weeds?" "I'm telling you we're going to feed our families with weeds," Yelena corrected. "There's a difference." By midday, the foundation was set. By evening, the dome was half built, and Rafa's arms ached in a way that felt almost good, the burn of honest work. Leah brought them water in chipped cups, her small face serious with concentration. That night, Gregor showed up. Then 2 more miners. Then the Okafor family from 3 doors down. They didn't say much, just picked up trowels and started laying stones. The next morning, the dome was complete. They'd worked through the night, hands bleeding, backs screaming, but the structure stood like a small fortress of hope in Rafa's yard. Yelena stuffed the fire chamber with Kenru pods and struck a flint. The first flame caught, then spread. Within minutes, the dome's interior glowed orange, and the basalt stones began to radiate heat that Rafa could feel from 3 meters away. "Now we wait," Yelena said. 4 hours for the stones to fully charge. Then we sweep out the coals, and we bake. Leah had been preparing the dough with help from Mrs. Okafor. Algae flour mixed with barley, water from the community well, a pinch of salt hoarded from better times. The dough was gray and dense, nothing like the golden wheat loaves Rafa remembered from Earth broadcasts. But when Leah kneaded it, tongue poking out in concentration, mimicking movement she'd watched her mother make 1,000 times, Rafa felt something crack open in his chest. They slid the first loaves in at sunset. The smell hit immediately, earthy and primal, cutting through the cold Karen wind like a declaration of war. Neighbors began to appear at the fence, drawn by something more powerful than curiosity. One by one, they drifted into the yard. When Yelena pulled the first loaf out, it was ugly, misshapen, dense as a brick and the color of mud. Leah tore off a piece with both hands. It steamed in the frigid air. She bit down and her eyes went wide. "It's warm, Dad," she whispered, like she'd forgotten what warm bread felt like. Then louder, with a smile that split her face. "It's so warm." She passed the loaf to Rafa. He broke off a piece and tasted earth, fire, stubbornness. It tasted like survival. By morning, there were 40 people waiting at his gate with bowls, pans, and wild hope in their eyes. The Veylan drones drifted overhead, sensors sweeping. But Kenru's smoke looked just like coolant, just like nothing at all. The oven's heat signature was small, dispersed, invisible. For the first time since the Directorate's sanctions, Rafa Calder smiled. The knock came at dawn. Rafa opened the door to find 12 neighbors standing in his yard, arms loaded with rocks, clay buckets, and nervous determination. "Teach us," said Mrs. Chen, a widow with 3 kids under 10. Her voice shook, but her eyes were steel. "Teach us to build them." Leah was already awake, sketching on scraps of cloth with charcoal. Simple diagrams, dome dimensions, stone arrangements, fire chamber specs. She'd watched Yelena draw the plans so many times she'd memorized every line. "Section 42, she said seriously, holding up a cloth marked with careful measurements. "Resting time for the stones. 4 hours minimum." Rafa felt pride bloom dangerously in his chest. His daughter was 9 years old and documenting resistance in pictures any child could follow. By noon, 3 more ovens were under construction across Senda Baisha. By evening, the first loaves from the new ovens began making their rounds. But it wasn't just bread moving through the settlement anymore. The women had organized something quieter, more dangerous. They called it the silent market, grain for bricks, water rights for dough, someone's medical skills for someone else's Kenru harvest. The bread became currency, but more than that, it became trust. Every loaf someone received was a debt of honor, a promise to protect the network. But not everyone believed in promises. Bruin Hale had worked construction with Rafa years ago, before the directorate hired him as a community liaison. He was human, 40-something, with soft hands and calculating eyes. He cornered Leah near the depot 3 days after the first baking, snatched the cloth from her hands. "What's this?" He held up the sketch, section 42 clearly visible. "Nothing," Leah said, but her voice was too small. Bruin ripped the cloth in half. "Your father's playing a dangerous game, little girl. When this ends badly, remember I tried to warn you." He walked away with half of section 42 in his pocket. That night, Rafa held his daughter while she cried over the torn diagram. "We fight with bread, not blood," he whispered into her hair. "Promise me, no matter what happens, we stay better than them." "I promise, Dad." The visitor arrived the next morning, escorted by 2 Veilon security drones. He was tall, humanoid but distinctly other, with silver eyes and skin that seemed to shift between gray and pale blue depending on the light. Half his face was covered in intricate tattoos that Rafa later learned were mourning marks in Veilon culture. "Alon Vex," the alien said, his voice soft and strangely accented. "Field auditor for the directorate. I'm here to inspect unauthorized thermal activity." Rafa stood his ground in the doorway. Behind him, Leah gripped the back of his shirt. Alon's silver eyes swept the yard, landed on the stone oven, still warm from the morning bake. He moved closer, and the drones followed like faithful dogs. Rafa tensed, ready for confiscation, arrest, worse. Instead, Alon knelt beside the oven. His long fingers traced the mortared stones with something that looked like reverence. "My people banned open flame 300 years ago," he said quietly. "After the burning ships incident, we decided fire was too dangerous to trust, too chaotic." His eyes lifted to Rafa's. "But you treat it like a friend." From inside, Leah emerged with a cloth-wrapped bundle. She walked right up to the alien auditor and held out the still warm bread. Alon stared at her for a long moment. Then, with trembling hands, he took the loaf. He tore off a piece and brought it to his mouth. He chewed slowly, his silver eyes filled with tears. "My companion," he whispered. "She died on Frost Station 7. The directorate cut power during contract negotiations, just like here. She froze because I couldn't. His voice cracked. "This bread, it's warm." The mask of the cold alien bureaucrat shattered completely. Underneath was just grief, just loss, just someone who understood cold too well. "I can help you," Alon said, looking between Rafa and Leah. "I shouldn't, but I will." That night he returned alone. No drones, no escort. He brought a datapad with patrol routes, thermal scanning schedules, blind spots in the surveillance grid. "Plant your ovens here," he said, marking locations. "The sensor overlap is weakest. You'll be invisible." He also brought small pieces of colored ceramic, delicate and beautiful. "Trade," he explained. "One for each loaf. These were hers. Now they can be yours." As Alon left, Leah whispered to her father, "The enemy bleeds like us." "Yes," Rafa said. "That's what they don't want us to remember." The stone book, as Leah called it, multiplied like a living thing. Copied onto cloth scraps, tattooed as discrete patterns on forearms, spray-painted on alley walls in symbolic shorthand. Section 42 appeared on the side of an abandoned warehouse. Dome ratios showed up hidden in the pattern of a widow's shawl. Each household that built an oven became a node in an invisible network, and each baking brought people together in ways the directorate couldn't track because they'd never learned to measure community. Elon came every 3 days, always at odd hours, always with a different excuse logged in his official reports. He paid for bread with his companion's ceramics, pieces of blue-green pottery that caught the light like frozen water. Each one was a memory he was finally letting go. "Why does bread feel warmer than a generator?" Leah asked him one evening, sitting on the stone wall while adults worked the ovens. Alon considered this seriously. A generator produces heat as exhaust, waste energy. But bread. He broke off a piece, held it up to the fading light. Bread is transformation. Grain becomes nourishment. Fire becomes life. Every bite carries intention. "You sound like Padre Tom," Leah said, grinning. The old priest had surprised everyone. For 20 years, Father Thomas had maintained a small chapel at the edge of Senda Baiha, giving sermons to dwindling crowds who mostly came for the heated building. When the directorate cut power, he'd locked the doors and everyone assumed that was that. Then one morning, the chapel doors opened to reveal the altar covered in flower dust. The priest stood in the doorway, sleeves rolled up, arms white to the elbows. First miracle was the loaves and fishes, he announced to the confused crowd. But I checked the text. It never said anything about God providing the oven. That part's on us. He'd built a stone oven right where the pulpit used to be. Above it, painted in careful letters, the first miracle was dividing what was already there. The chapel became the largest community baking site. Old women who'd once knitted during sermons now kneaded dough. Teenagers who'd snuck out during prayers now tended fires. The silent market operated openly within the chapel walls because even directorate drones hesitated to scan religious buildings too aggressively. Yelena had become something like a professor, teaching oven engineering to anyone who asked. She'd started marking good students with charcoal fingerprints on their foreheads, a joke that became a badge of honor. Graduated from the School of Hot Hands, people called it. The bread improved, too. Experiments produced variations. Kenru ash mixed into dough for minerals, dried algae protein for binding. Even a version with synthesized yeast cultures scavenged from abandoned brewery equipment. None of it tasted like earth bread, but it tasted like survival, ingenuity, stubbornness. The directorate still didn't notice. Thermal signatures remained dispersed, below alarm thresholds. Kenru smoke still read as industrial waste. The sanctions continued, but Senda Baiksha had stopped starving. Other settlements began asking questions. How were they surviving? Traders reported that Senda Baiksha still had healthy children, working adults, no cold deaths. The stone book spread beyond their borders. A fishing village 60 kilometers north built ovens. A mining camp in the southern highlands. Each one added their own innovations, their own sections. A woman in Clearwater Settlement invented a double-chamber design that worked on wind power alone. They called it the Millennium Leaven and sketched it into Section 117. Bruin Hale watched all of this with narrowing eyes. He'd been passed over for actual authority, kept on as liaison, but given no real power. The directorate trusted him only slightly more than they trusted the rest of the humans. He began taking notes, drawing his own maps. But where Leah's diagrams showed how to build, Bruin's showed where to destroy. One night, Elon found Rafa working late, repairing a cracked dome. "There's something you should know," the Valen said. "I've seen the internal reports. The directorate is wondering why this settlement hasn't collapsed yet. They're planning enhanced monitoring protocols. How long do we have?" "Weeks. Maybe less if someone reports directly to the regional supervisor." Alon's silver eyes found Bruin's house across the square. "Your people have a word for it, collaborator." Rafa's jaw tightened. "I know." "In my culture," Alon said softly, "we have a saying, the fire that warms also reveals. Be careful what gets illuminated." Above them, a dozen thin columns of Kenru smoke rose into the Karen night. invisible to sensors, obvious to anyone who knew how to look. The network had grown too large to hide much longer, but it had also grown too large to easily destroy. 40 ovens across 3 settlements, hundreds of people who remembered what warmth tasted like. The resistance had stopped being about one man's grief or one engineer's plan. It had become something else entirely, something the Directorate's algorithms couldn't quantify. It had become hope, baked into stone and shared hand to hand. The morning the network hit 50 ovens, Yelena gathered everyone in the chapel to celebrate. Children drew oven diagrams in the dirt outside. Adults shared techniques like trading cards, the Clearwater double chamber, the Highland quick heat method, someone's grandmother's trick for ash crust that sealed moisture in. Leah had expanded the stone book to include a section on fuel alternatives, dried moss, compressed grain husks, even a type of beetle larvae that, when dried, burned slow and hot. Section 89. When Kenru runs out, improvise. The bread had evolved too. Oshiri refugees from the eastern districts, gray-skinned aliens with 4 arms and compound eyes, had started showing up at the chapel. They brought their own grains, curious about the human technique that required no electricity. "We heard warmth," one Oshiri elder clicked in broken standard. "Heard humans make firestone that Directorate cannot see." Father Tome welcomed them with flour-dusty hands. "Everyone eats. That's the rule." The cover came next, amphibious beings from Karen's northern wetlands who normally kept to themselves. They needed higher moisture in their environment, struggled with the Directorate's climate-controlled housing, but the stone ovens radiated humidity along with heat, created microclimates that made them comfortable. "Your fire breathes water," a caver named Slosh observed, membranes flickering with surprise. "How?" "Clay holds moisture," Yelena explained, sketching quickly. "As it heats, slow release. We could modify the design for wetter fuel, increase your comfort zone by maybe 15%. Teach us this human stubbornness," Slosh said, and the translation device struggled with a word that meant determination mixed with beautiful foolishness. The cultural barriers dissolved over shared labor. Oshiri precision met human improvisation. Caver water sense identified perfect clay deposits. They weren't just building ovens anymore. They were building something the Directorate had spent decades preventing. Genuine cooperation between species. The thermal confusion helped. With ovens scattered across 3 settlements now, Directorate sensors picked up dozens of small signatures that didn't match standard patterns, too dispersed for industry, too consistent for natural geothermal. Algorithms flagged them as anomalies, but low priority. Probably sensor drift. Probably nothing. For 2 weeks, it looked like they'd won. Rafa should have known better. The drone that fell from the sky landed in Gregor's garden, rotors still spinning weakly. Leah found it before anyone else, noted the identification, NCC-117. She showed it to her father with worried eyes. "Why would it fall here?" "Malfunction," Rafa said, but his hands were already moving to smash the unit. "Wait." Alon appeared from nowhere, moved faster than Rafa expected. "Let me check the logs first." His face went gray as he read. "It was shot down, not by you, by Directorate security. It was transmitting unauthorized data." "What data?" "Everything. Oven locations, thermal patterns, names." Alon looked up, silver eyes wide with fear. Someone's been feeding them intelligence for weeks. This drone was the proof. They eliminated it to protect their source. Bruin Hale was gone by sunset. His house stood empty, datapad deleted, but neighbors reported seeing him enter a Directorate transport 3 hours earlier. The supervisor's transmission came at midnight, broadcast on every emergency channel. "Attention citizens of Senda Baisha settlement and surrounding districts. You are in violation of safety protocols 7 Alpha through 7 Echo. Unauthorized combustion, unsanctioned assembly, technological regression. Effective immediately, we are implementing Gray Protocol. All thermal activity will be suppressed. All resistance infrastructure will be seized. Compliance is mandatory." The drones came at dawn, not 3 or 4, but hundreds, swarming like mechanical locusts. They dispensed foam that smothered flames instantly, choked Kenru fires, made the ovens cold and dead. Teams of Valen security forces followed, sledgehammers ringing against stone. Rafa watched them destroy his oven, the first one, the one that had started everything. Leah clung to his leg, tears streaming, hands full of bread they'd baked the night before. Yelena fought. Actually physically fought, throwing tools at soldiers until they restrained her, dragged her toward the transport. She screamed coordinates as they took her, trying to warn others, trying to give them time. Tower Cold. They're taking us to Tower Cold. Section 42. Remember Section 42? Father Tome tried to shield the chapel oven. They broke his arm and demolished it anyway. By noon, half the ovens were rubble. By evening, 23 people were in custody, Yelena among them. Rafa tried to surrender in her place. Take me. She's the architect, but I was the first. This was my idea. The supervisor, a Valan with cold violet eyes and a voice like grinding metal, actually laughed. You think we want trade? We want examples. Your engineer will serve nicely. Without fire, the supervisor announced to the gathered crowd, you will return to dust. This is the order of things. This is the price of rebellion. That night, Rafa sat at his kitchen table with the last 6 loaves they'd managed to hide. Leah had cried herself to sleep. The house was freezing. Outside, sledgehammers still rang against stone. The knock came just before midnight. Alonvek stood in the doorway, uniform torn, face bleeding from a wound across his mourning tattoos. He carried a device Rafa didn't recognize. Tower Cold, Alon said without preamble. Maximum security detention, 300 kilometers north. I know the layout. I can open the cells. Why would you do that? Because I'm tired of my people mistaking cruelty for order. Alon's silver eyes burned. I can open the cell, but you need to open eyes, my people's eyes. Show them what you showed me. He put the device on the table between them. One chance. If we fail, I'm executed for treason. You're labeled insurgents. Everyone we care about suffers. And if we succeed? Then maybe, Alon said quietly, fire stops being something to fear. Rafa looked at the bread, at his sleeping daughter, at the alien who traded his loyalties for warmth. Tell me the plan. Alon's hands shook as he pulled up files on the device. Not just data, but records going back decades. Lists of settlements. Dates. A repeating pattern that made Rafa's stomach turn. Kepler Station 25 and 47, Directorate suspended energy during labor dispute. 42, dead from exposure before compliance. Tau Ceti Minor 2551, power rationed to enforce contract renegotiation. Settlement abandoned within 3 months. Frost Station 72559. Alon's voice cracked. Where my Senna died. Not an accident, not a malfunction. Policy. Rafa stared at the screen, at the clinical language describing calculated cruelty. They've done this before, every time. 17 colonies, Alon confirmed. Always the same. Cut power, wait for submission, restore control. The Directorate calls it behavioral correction architecture. He looked up with eyes full of shame. I helped audit 3 of these. I signed reports calling them effective. You didn't know. I chose not to know. Alon's fist hit the table. Senna tried to tell me. She worked in environmental systems, saw the patterns. I told her she was being emotional, that the Directorate had good reasons. He laughed bitterly. Then they locked her sector during negotiations, and I learned exactly how good their reasons were. Leah appeared in the doorway, wrapped in a blanket, eyes red from crying. Yelena's really smart. She'll figure out how to stay safe. Rafa pulled her close. Yeah, baby, she will. But Alon was already shaking his head. Tower Cold isn't designed for safety. It's designed for examples. They'll stream her trial, show her broken, make everyone else afraid. The device beeped, new data incoming. The silent market is still operating. Elon said, surprise in his voice. The women never stopped. Look, footage from a surveillance drone marked classified. It showed Mrs. Chen and 3 others moving through back alleys, passing bundles. Not bread, supplies, clay, stones, dried kenru wrapped in cloth. They're still building, Rafa breathed. The directorate destroyed half the ovens, but they're already rebuilding. More than that. Alon zoomed in on markings painted on walls. Stonebook symbols, modified. Section 42 crossed with new notation. They're adapting, learning from the raids. These new designs are smaller, more hidden. Thermal signatures even harder to detect. The video shifted. Father Tome, arm in a makeshift sling, blessing a group of young miners. Behind them, a partially buried oven, barely visible. They didn't break, Leah whispered. We didn't break. But Rafa was looking at another feed. Tower Cold Detention Center, a grid of cells. One thermal signature that had to be Yelena curled in a corner. The plan, he said. Tell me. Alon pulled up a schematic. Tower Cold has predictable patrol patterns. They rely on technology over personnel. If we can overload their sensor network, create false targets across the region, they'll have to redistribute forces to investigate. How do we overload sensors? Heat signatures, lots of them. Simultaneous ignition across a wide area to mimic industrial sabotage. Make them think there's a coordinated attack on infrastructure. Rafa understood immediately. The ovens. We light every remaining oven at once. Not just light, modify them. Yelena's new designs. The buried ones, they're invisible until fired. If every household in 3 settlements lights simultaneously, the thermal bloom will look like a reactor breach. And while they're chasing ghosts, I go in. I have codes for the detention blocks. I can open Yelena's cell, but I'll be flagged immediately as rogue. Alon met Rafa's eyes. This will be my last act as a Valen official. After this, I'm a traitor to my government. After this, your family, Rafa corrected. They worked through the night, refining the plan. The risk was enormous. If the timing failed, if anyone got caught too early, the entire network would be exposed and crushed completely. Dawn brought an unexpected visitor. A young Valen soldier, barely more than juvenile by their aging, stood at the door. His uniform was crisp, but his hands trembled. I'm not supposed to be here, he said in heavily accented standard. But yesterday, during the raid, someone gave me... He pulled out a small wrapped bundle. Bread, still faintly warm. I haven't tasted anything like this since my birth colony, before I joined service. He looked between them desperately. Is it true? You make this without directorate resources? Just stone and fire? Leah nodded solemnly. We can teach you, if you want. The soldier's face did something complicated. I can't, but I won't report thermal activity in Sector 7 tomorrow night. My patrol route has gaps. Here. He handed Alon a data pad. 18-minute window, sensor blind spots. After he left, Rafa asked, Can we trust that? Tosh. We have to, Alon said, because we're out of choices. That afternoon, Leah ran messages to every intact household. Cloth scraps with simple symbols, moon phase, time, action. The silent market activated its full network. Every woman, every elder, every child who could stack stones received instructions. Rafa found Father Tome at the destroyed chapel, trying to rebuild the oven one-handed. Tomorrow night, Rafa said, we're going to do something very stupid. The old priest smiled through split lips. About time. The first miracle was dividing what was there. The second is multiplying it against all logic. As the sun set over Karen IV's red soil, Rafa held his daughter and looked at the rubble of their oven. We fight with bread, he reminded her. Not blood, she finished. Then, with the fierce determination of a 9-year-old who'd already lost too much, but Dad? Sometimes bread needs defending too. Rafa didn't correct her, because she was right. The sledgehammers returned at dawn. Rafa's rebuilt oven lasted 45 minutes before Directorate forces reduced it to rubble again. This time they didn't just destroy it. They salted the ground, poisoned the clay deposits, made rebuilding nearly impossible. Bruin Hale supervised personally, wearing a new uniform with Settlement Liaison Coordinator emblazoned across the chest. His soft hands stayed clean while others swung hammers. "This is mercy," he announced to the watching crowd. "The supervisor could have taken all of you. Instead, he's giving you another chance to comply." "Comply with starving!" someone shouted. Bruin's smile was patronizing. "The Directorate provides adequate nutrition rations. You don't need fire. You never did. That's just human sentiment making you weak." Rafa lunged, got 3 steps before neighbors held him back. Leah screamed for her father as security forces surrounded them. The supervisor's voice crackled over loudspeakers. Raphael Calder, "You were offered terms. Surrender your conspiracy. Name your collaborators. In exchange, we release the engineer." "I'm the conspiracy," Rafa shouted back. "Just me. Let everyone else go." "Lies." The supervisor's violet eyes gleamed from the transport platform. "You're not capable of this scale of organization. Someone else plans. Someone else leads. Give us names." "There are no names. It's just people trying not to freeze." "Then your engineer remains detained, indefinitely." Rafa broke free from the neighbors, ran toward the platform. Security forces met him halfway, stun batons crackling. The first blow caught his ribs, the second his shoulder. He went down hard, tasting blood and red dirt. Through blurred vision he saw Leah trying to reach him. "Mrs." Chen caught her, held her back even as the girl fought like something feral. The supervisor looked down at Rafa with something like disappointment. "Without fire, you return to dust. This is the natural order. This is what you chose." They left him in the dirt, left the rubble, left Senda Baiksha with 19 more arrests and warnings broadcast on every channel. This is the cost of resistance. Submit or suffer. Father Tom found Rafa an hour later, still lying where he'd fallen. "Can't get up," Rafa admitted through cracked lips. "Then we'll wait until you can." The old priest sat beside him, broken arm cradled. "They took 40% of our ovens, which means 60% remain. They arrested 23 people, which means hundreds are still free. They think they're winning." "Rafa, that's when they're most blind." But it didn't feel like winning when Mrs. Chen reported 3 families had abandoned Senda Baisha overnight, seeking Directorate-approved housing in the capital. It didn't feel like winning when Gregor admitted he couldn't rebuild, didn't have the strength anymore, just wanted the pain to stop. The network was fracturing. Fear did what sledgehammers couldn't. That night, Leah crept into her father's room. Rafa's ribs screamed, but he made space for her anyway. "If you don't come back tomorrow," she said quietly, "I need to know how to finish the ovens." "Baby, I'm coming back. Promise twice. I promise twice." But she was already sketching by candlelight, memorizing dimensions he'd shown her, measurements Yelena had taught. Section 42, Rest Time. Section 89, Fuel Alternatives. She was 9 years old and learning independence neither of them wanted. Rafa taught her anyway, how to test clay consistency, how to judge stone temperature, how to know when the dome was ready even without instruments. "The fire tells you," he said. "You just have to listen." Midnight brought Elon, moving like a ghost through the security patrols. He was bleeding from wounds Rafa didn't ask about. The Valen collapsed into a chair, silver eyes dulled with exhaustion. "They know," Alon said. "They know I've been feeding you information. I've been marked for review. Tomorrow I'm supposed to report to the regional supervisor for performance evaluation." He laughed hollowly. "That's Velan speak for interrogation." "Then don't go. If I don't, they accelerate everything. Execute Yelena immediately. Crack down harder. I can buy you maybe 48 hours before they realize I've gone completely rogue." "And then?" Then I'm dead either way. Alon looked around the cold kitchen at the breadcrumbs still scattered on the table from their last meal. But maybe I can die having done something that mattered. Senna would have liked that. He spread out the updated plan. The night of 1,000 furnaces, they'd started calling it in whispers. Every surviving oven plus every household capable of building a quick fire pit. Simultaneous ignition at the moment of Alon's infiltration. Thermal chaos across 3 settlements and beyond. The young soldier, the one who gave us the patrol gaps, he found 6 others willing to look away, Alon said. Not help actively, just not see. It's something. It's everything, Rafa corrected. They refined details until dawn. Timing, signal protocols, escape routes, contingencies for a dozen different failures. Leah fell asleep on Rafa's lap, still clutching her sketches. Alon watched them with something like longing. Can I ask you something? The Valen said quietly. Why do this? Why risk everything for bread? Rafa looked down at his daughter. Because bread means someone cared enough to make it, means someone thought about tomorrow, means we're still human, still here, still warm. He met Alon's silver eyes. Your people took fire because they were afraid of it, but fire isn't dangerous. Forgetting how to tend it is. My people have forgotten many things, Alon said. Maybe it's time we remembered. He pulled out a small device, pressed it into Rafa's hand. When you're ready, press this. I'll know. I'll move. After Alon left, Rafa sat in the darkness, holding his sleeping daughter and the trigger for revolution. Outside, hammers still rang against stone somewhere in the settlement. The sound of destruction, but underneath, quieter. He heard other sounds, clay being shaped, stones being stacked, whispered instructions passing through walls, the sound of building, of stubborn, impossible hope. Tomorrow they would either save Yelena and change everything, or die trying. There was no middle ground left. Rafa looked at the crumbs on the table and made his choice. The word spread through the silent market like fire through dry kenru. Not spoken, but passed hand to hand in folded cloth, traced symbols, shared glances. By afternoon, every household had received the same message. Tonight, at the 3rd moon, light everything. Yelena's improved designs proved their worth. The buried ovens, half hidden, camouflaged as drainage systems or storage pits, numbered far more than the Directorate realized. For every oven they destroyed, 2 had survived underground, invisible until lit. Mrs. Chen organized the women's network with military precision. Section 42 sites, report. Hands raised across the gathering. Section 89 supplies? More hands. Who can build fast-burn pits in under an hour? Nearly everyone. The plan was insane. Build dozens of quick-fire positions, light them simultaneously with the buried ovens, create a thermal signature so massive and dispersed that Directorate sensors would interpret it as infrastructure sabotage. Force them to investigate every location at once, and in that chaos, get Yelena out. The Oshiri arrived at sunset, led by the gray-skinned elder who'd first asked about the human stubbornness. They brought their whole community, 43 individuals with 4 arms each, capable of building twice as fast as humans. You shared bread when you had little, the elder clicked. We share hands when you have less. The caver came from the wetlands, Slosh and 15 others, carrying modified clay that held moisture longer, burned hotter. Your fire breathes water, Slosh said again. Tonight we all breathe together. Father Tome moved through the preparations like a general, broken arm and all. He'd organized the chapel as command center, coordinating the 3 settlements through runners and hand signals. No electronic communication that Directorate could intercept. I've blessed weapons before, he admitted to Rafa, during the colonial wars. Thought I was done with that. But this? He gestured at the half-built ovens, the quiet, determined faces. Never blessed hope before. Don't know the right prayers. Make them up, Rafa suggested. So, the old priest did. Moved from site to site, pressing clay-dusty hands to each oven structure, whispering made-up blessings. May your stones hold heat. May your fires stay hidden. May your bread feed revolution. People laughed, but their eyes were wet. Alon appeared as darkness fell, uniform abandoned, wearing borrowed workers' clothes that hung wrong on his tall frame. He'd brought a makeshift tattooing device. Velan morning tradition, he explained, carefully burning Yelena's oven design into his forearm, alongside Senna's memory marks. If I fail tonight, someone needs to remember how this worked, how humans turned weakness into weapons. Leah watched with wide eyes. Does it hurt? Yes. Alon smiled, and it was the first time Rafa had seen him look genuinely peaceful. But good pain, choosing pain, that's different. Item, that's very human, Leah said seriously. Thank you. The young Veylan soldier returned, bringing 6 others, all barely out of training. They couldn't help openly, but they brought patrol schedules, security gaps, blind spots in Tower Cold's sensor grid. We were told humans are dangerous because they're emotional, one said, voice shaking. But you fed us, even when you were hungry. That's not dangerous, that's... She struggled with the translation. That's what we forgot how to be. As midnight approached, Rafa and Leah built the last quick-fire pit together in their yard, where the first oven had stood. Leah's hands were small but steady, placing stones with the precision Yelena had taught her. You're not coming with me tomorrow, Rafa said. I know. Leah didn't argue, just kept working. But you're coming back. I promised twice. 3 times now. 3 times then. She looked up at him with Elena's eyes, fierce and bright. Mom used to say humans are made of 2 things, fire and stubbornness. The Veylans can take one, but not both. Your mom was smart. So am I. Leah placed the final stone. The oven's ready, Dad. D. Across Sendabaiha, across Clearwater, across the highland settlements, families completed their preparations. Fast-burn pits dug into frozen ground. Buried ovens cleared of concealing earth. Kenru bundles stacked, stones arranged. Every household a potential signal fire, a beacon of defiance. The Directorate monitored from orbit, satellites reading thermal signatures that looked normal. Cold. Compliant. Dead. They had no idea what waited underneath. Father Tome stood on the chapel steps as the 3rd moon rose. He held no bell, made no announcement, just raised one flower-dusty hand. Across 3 settlements, across alien and human communities alike, hundreds of people struck flint to tinder. Hundreds of fires caught, fed, grew. Rafa pressed the trigger device Alon had given him. 300 kilometers north, in the detention block of Tower Cold, Alon Vex looked at his wrist device, saw the signal, and began moving. The thermal bloom lit up Directorate sensors like a supernova. Alarms screamed. Satellites recalibrated, trying to understand how an entire region had apparently ignited simultaneously. Infrastructure sabotage! Someone screamed in the command center. Reactor breach, multiple sites, thermal signatures consistent with industrial explosion. Forces mobilized, drones scrambled, every available unit diverted to investigate the spreading heat signatures. And in that chaos, in those precious minutes of confusion and panic, a rogue Veylon auditor with mourning marks and revolution tattooed on his arm opened locked doors and whispered to a brilliant engineer who'd survived on stubbornness and spite, Yelena Joe, your friends sent me. They're making the whole planet burn. Time to go home. The night of 1,000 furnaces had begun. In Senda Baiksha, Leah stood beside her father, watching their pit fire glow against the darkness. Around them, hundreds of lights bloomed like stars. We're not fighting with blood, she whispered. No, Rafa agreed, holding his daughter close as the sky filled with confused drone lights and alarm signals. We're fighting with every warm thing humans ever learned to make, and we're winning. Tower Cold's detention center had never experienced a system overload. Its algorithms were designed for predictable threats, escape attempts, isolated riots, mechanical failures. What they weren't designed for was the entire surrounding region apparently catching fire simultaneously. In her cell, Yelena Jo heard the alarms and smiled through cracked lips. She'd been counting thermal bloom patterns from memory, calculating dispersion rates. Somewhere out there, her ovens were burning. All of them, at once. The cell door hissed open. Alenvec stood backlit by emergency lighting, looking nothing like the careful auditor who'd first eaten her bread. "Still fermenting?" he asked. "Always," Yelena rasped, letting him pull her up. "Rafa, doing something beautifully stupid. Come on." 300 kilometers south, Rafa led a group of 15 through Directorate checkpoints that had been abandoned minutes earlier. Guards pulled to investigate thermal anomalies. They moved like traders, wearing heavy coats, carrying woven baskets that steamed in the frozen air. Inside the baskets, bread, 70 loaves, still warm from emergency baking, wrapped in cloth that couldn't quite contain the smell. "This is the stupidest plan," Gregor muttered. "That's why it'll work," Mrs. Chen replied. They weren't wrong. The scent hit the remaining Tower Cold guards before visual confirmation. Rich, earthy, impossible. It smelled like home, like childhood, like everything the Directorate's processed rations had tried to replace and failed. The young Valen soldier from before, the one who'd accepted bread, stood at the inner checkpoint. His hand hovered over the alarm. His eyes met Rafa's. Then he smelled it too. His membranes flickered with emotion his training tried to suppress. "I don't see anything," he whispered, stepping aside. 18-minute gap, remember? They were inside. Tower Cold's central courtyard erupted in chaos as Directorate forces tried to coordinate responses to hundreds of false positives. Rafa's group moved through the confusion like smoke, distributing bread to anyone who'd take it. A guard reached for his weapon. Mrs. Chen thrust a loaf at him. "Eat first, fight after. Fair?" The guard, a Valen with green-tinged skin, took it reflexively, bit down. His weapon lowered as involuntary memory flooded his expression. "My grandmother made something like this, before the efficiency reforms, before we outlawed wood-burning." He didn't raise the weapon again. Father Tom's voice crackled over hijacked loudspeakers, broadcast from the chapel 300 kilometers away. "Whoever has eaten the bread, protect those who baked it. That's the covenant. That's the deal." And something impossible happened. From the low-district neighborhoods surrounding Tower Cold, the Oshiri and Kavra communities emerged. Not armed, not violent, just present. Hundreds of four-armed aliens and amphibious beings, forming a living chain between the tower and the approaching Directorate reinforcements. They passed bread hand to hand to hand to hand, a relay of warmth through cold streets. Aliens who'd learned human stubbornness shared it with other aliens who'd forgotten what community felt like. The bread moved faster than orders, faster than authority. Yelena stumbled into the courtyard, Alon supporting her. She saw Rafa and something cracked in her engineer's composure. "You absolute maniac." "Learned from the best," Rafa shot back. The supervisor's transport descended, violet-eyed and furious. "Enough. Disperse immediately or face permanent sanction." Gas canisters deployed, crowd control measure 7 Tango. Except the crowd wasn't a crowd. It was a community, and communities don't disperse. They compress, protect, endure. Then Bruin Hale appeared at the courtyard gate, his new uniform pristine, his weapon raised. He'd maintained position when others abandoned posts, proving loyalty to his new masters. He aimed at Rafa. "You should have taken the deal. Should have been smart." Leah pushed through the crowd, 9 years old and fearless in the way only children defending their parents can be. She held a loaf with both hands, raised it like an offering or a shield. "This is what we are," she said, voice clear. Are you? Bruin's weapon shook. The smell of the bread hit him, and something in his face fractured. Memory of his own mother, maybe. Of kitchens before collaboration. Of choices he'd made that couldn't be unmade. His finger tightened on the trigger. Aylin's shot was precise, not lethal, just enough to shatter the weapon, send it spinning from Bruin's hand. Enough, the Valen said quietly. Enough suffering. Enough fear. Just enough. The gate collapsed inward. Not forced, unlocked from inside by guards who'd eaten bread and remembered what it meant to be more than their programming. The crowd surged through, not to destroy, to build. Within minutes, every corner of Tower Cold's courtyard had become an impromptu bakery. People brought hidden Kenru bundles, the Oshiri-shaped clay with four-handed precision. The caver identified perfect stone compositions. They built ovens in the shadow of Detention Center, in the heart of Directorate control, and lit them with defiant joy. The supervisor watched his authority dissolve into shared labor, into four-armed aliens teaching two-armed guards how to knead dough, into his own soldiers breaking bread with those they'd been ordered to suppress. Rafa approached him slowly, hands empty except for a loaf still steaming from coals. He didn't speak, just broke the bread in half and offered one portion. The supervisor stared at it for a long moment. Then, with hands that had signed detention orders and authorized force, he took it, bit down, tasted what his people had forbidden themselves for 3 centuries. His expression did something complicated. Not surrender, understanding. We forgot, he said finally. We forgot why we used to gather around fires. We made it about danger instead of warmth. You can remember now, Rafa said. We'll teach you. The fight ended not with violence, but with rising dough. Not with conquest, but with shared heat. As dawn broke over Tower Cold, Yelena climbed onto a platform, arm around Leah, and looked at the impossible scene. Humans and 3 alien species, former guards and former prisoners, all working together to build, to bake, to feed. She raised her voice. The stone book isn't finished. We need Section 117 for joint species cooperation, Section 143 for cold climate modifications, Section 200 for forgiveness protocols. Laughter and cheers. Someone started a work song. Others joined. Alan found Rafa at the newest oven, watching coals settle into cooking temperature. The Valan's morning marks seemed lighter somehow, less burden than badge. My people, Alan said quietly, will need to learn everything again. How to trust fire, how to trust each other, how to be more than efficient. Lucky for you, Rafa replied. Humans are excellent teachers of beautiful chaos. From somewhere in the crowd, Father Tome's voice rose. They said without fire, we'd return to dust, but they forgot. Humans are made of dust, and we've been shaping it into miracles since we learned to make fists. Today we made bread. Tomorrow we'll make justice. And they'll learn why you don't bet against people who carry warmth inside them. The ovens burned. The bread rose. And 300 kilometers above, Directorate satellites recorded thermal signatures they could no longer interpret as anything but hope. The Karen Accords took 3 weeks to negotiate. The Directorate sent actual diplomats this time, not supervisors. They sat at tables heated by stone ovens, eating bread baked by the people they'd tried to starve into submission, and rewrote colonial policy from the ground up. Article 1. No governing body shall enact total energy denial as behavioral correction. Article 7. Cultural survival technology, including but not limited to stone ovens, forges, and traditional heat sources, shall be recognized as inalienable rights. Article 15. Communities maintain sovereignty over fire. Bruin Hale stood trial before his own neighbors. They could have demanded imprisonment, exile, worse. Instead, Father Tome proposed something that made the Directorate observers deeply uncomfortable. Restorative labor. Work the bakeries, the old priest said. 5 years. Learn why bread matters. Learn what you almost destroyed. Der Bruin wept during sentencing. He'd expected punishment. He got education instead, which proved far more transformative. The School of Hot Hands opened in the rebuilt chapel 2 months later. Yelena Joe stood before the first class. 40 students representing 6 species, ages ranging from juvenile to elder. "Engineering isn't about complexity," she said, charcoal already smudging her fingers. "It's about understanding what's essential: fire, stone, time, patience. We're teaching you the foundation under every technology we've ever built." Leah became the school's youngest instructor, specializing in visual documentation. Her illustrated stone book was translated into 12 languages and 3 nonverbal communication systems. Children across the sector learned oven building from drawings that transcended species. Section 42 appeared in art galleries. Section 89 became a children's song. Section 200, which Yelena wrote specifically about forgiveness through shared labor, was adopted by 3 planetary governments as Conflict Resolution Protocol. The silent market evolved into the Karen Cooperative, officially registered, legally protected, operated primarily by the women who'd kept everyone fed when institutions failed. They controlled supply chains now, set prices, distributed resources according to need rather than efficiency metrics. Mrs. Chen served as first director. "We already knew how to organize," she said, when reporters asked how a resistance network became a legitimate business. "We just stopped hiding." Aliens integrated into human communities in ways the Directorate had spent decades preventing. Oshiri precision improved human engineering. Caver water sense revolutionized agriculture. And humans taught everyone else the dangerous, beautiful art of stubbornness disguised as hope. The young Velan soldiers who'd looked away during the rescue received commendations, not punishment. The Directorate, reading political currents accurately for once, declared them heroes of species integration initiatives. The soldiers themselves just called it doing what felt right. Alon Vex never returned to official service. He'd been stripped of rank, citizenship, all formal status in Velan society. Technically, he was stateless. Practically, he was home. 6 months after the night of 1,000 furnaces, Rafa found him in the yard, teaching a mixed class of human and Velan children how to judge clay consistency. "Too wet, it cracks when fired," Alon explained, his mourning marks now accompanied by teaching marks, celebration marks, living marks. "Too dry, it won't bind. You feel for the balance. Here, like this." Small hands, human and alien, squeezed clay samples, giggled at the texture, learned. Rafa watched until the lesson ended and children scattered toward other activities. The evening wind cut across Karen's red soil, cold but not cruel. The oven in the yard radiated gentle heat, smoke rising thin and invisible. Alon stood, wiping his hands on a cloth already stained beyond redemption. He looked at Rafa with those silver eyes that had seen too much and chosen to see more anyway. "Can I ask you something?" The Velan's voice was careful. "Always. This place, this life, the work, the teaching, the—" Alon gestured at everything and nothing. "Can I call it home? Or is that presuming too much?" Rafa didn't answer with words. He walked to the oven, pulled out a loaf from the afternoon bake and broke it cleanly in half, handed one portion to Alon, kept the other. They ate in comfortable silence, watching the sun set over settlements that no longer feared the cold. "Dad!" Leah sprinted across the yard, 10 years old now, taller, carrying a basket that threatened to tip. "The new batch rose too much. Look at this one, it's huge." She held up a loaf the size of her head, misshapen and glorious. Rafa caught her as she stumbled, both of them laughing. Alon steadied the basket, his longer arms reaching over both their heads. "Too much yeast?" he suggested. "Too much hope," Leah corrected. Section 201. When bread gets excited, let it. "That's not a real section," Yelena called from the porch. "It is now. I'm writing it." Years later, when Leah was grown and teaching her own students, she'd remember this moment as the first time her father smiled the way he used to before her mother died. Not replacing that loss, but making space beside it for new joy. The seasons turned. The ovens multiplied. Across Charon 4 and spreading to neighboring systems, stone domes rose like architectural promises. The Directorate tried to quantify the economic impact, measure the efficiency increase, calculate the resource redistribution. They failed, because you can't measure community in metrics, can't spreadsheet stubbornness, can't algorithm hope. 20 years later, from an observation platform orbiting Charon 4, you could see them. Thousands of thin smoke columns rising from settlements across 3 continents. Each one a household choosing warmth over submission. Each one a small fire that refused to die. The voice that narrated the archival footage was older, steady, touched with pride. When they denied us fire, we remembered something they'd forgotten. Stone holds sun. Clay remembers rain. And humans, when you try to freeze them, they just build smaller, burn smarter, share wider. The camera panned across Rafa's yard, now part of a historical preservation site. 3 generations worked together, teaching another class of mixed-species students the ancient art of keeping warm. They thought fire was the weapon, but fire was just the method. The real weapon was always what we did with it. We fed everyone. We included everyone. We chose warmth when coldness was easier. A child on screen, species indeterminate, asked the classic question, "But why build ovens when generators are more efficient?" An elder, human, answered, "Because efficiency is what you do. Community is what you are. Never confuse the two." Yesturis. The footage ended with a simple memorial stone in Senda Baixa's central square, engraved in 12 languages. Here, humans remembered fire, and taught the universe to remember too. But the story didn't end with monuments. It ended in kitchens, in yards. In every place someone chose to build something warm when the universe tried to make them cold. It ended with a 9-year-old girl asking her father if museums could feed people, and with a 41-year-old man made of grief and stone dust deciding that yes, they could. It ended with bread rising in the darkness, with dough that should have stayed flat but decided to grow anyway, with ovens that shouldn't have worked but did because humans are stubborn that way. With fire that was supposed to be dangerous becoming the first language of peace. They said without fire, we'd return to dust. They forgot. We shape dust into everything we need, including revolutions, including bread, including the future. When they withheld fire, we built it from stone and will. When they denied us heat, we generated our own. When they thought they'd frozen our resistance, we just rose slower, spread wider, burned longer. Because that's what humans do. We carry warmth inside us. We share it when sharing costs everything. We turn deprivation into innovation, barriers into bridges, and every attempt to break us into another reason to bake. Humanity doesn't give up. It just gets better at improvising. The ovens still burn on Charon 4. They'll burn tomorrow. They'll burn in places the Directorate hasn't even tried to control yet. And if anyone ever tries to take fire away again, there'll be a 9-year-old girl somewhere, drawing diagrams in the dirt, teaching others how to build warmth from nothing but stone and stubbornness. Section 42, Rest Time. Section 89, Adapt when resources fail. Section 200, Forgiveness through shared labor. Section Infinity, Humans keep the fire, always. Humanity, fuck yeah. Maybe that was humanity's secret all along. Not strength, not brilliance, not conquest, but the quiet art of refusing extinction through warmth. When they took our fire, we didn't curse the dark. We learned how to bake in it. Every oven was a declaration, every loaf a manifesto written in steam and stubbornness. Somewhere between dust and flame, we remembered what gods never needed to teach us. That survival is just love with calloused hands. So what will we do when the systems we built go cold? When efficiency replaces empathy? Will we still gather around the little fires we make together? And if the universe ever forbids warmth again, literal or human, will we remember how to rebuild it from stone, will, and a bit of chaos? If you stayed until now, write the word warmth in the comments. That's our secret handshake through the void. Tell me where you're watching from. I want to know where the next oven is being built. Subscribe if you believe that stories can still feed people. Hit the like if you've ever improvised with less than nothing, and share this tale so someone out there remembers. When the cold comes, humans bake back. Watch the next story on the card, because somewhere another spark is waiting.